So I was not someone who came from a professional investigative background. I really started what I was doing as a hobby because I found certain things really interesting. And at that time, it was the events of the Arab Spring, where really for the first time, you're having these situations where there's a huge amount of content being shared, not just by news organizations, but by people on the ground who are taking photographs, making allegations, putting videos online. And this was accessible to everyone now, thanks to the use of social media and really the rise of smartphone technology from 2008 onwards. So what we have now is a connection to millions, billions of people across the world, and they're sharing all sorts of information. And when it comes to conflicts, when it comes to the events of the Arab Spring, that was something that was very new and I just found fascinating and started really digging into. As I was following the conflict in Libya in 2011, I was joining online arguments basically on places like the Guardian Middle East Live blog. They had a comment section and I was posting there pretty much every day at the kind of height of it. And it used to frustrate me that you'd have people who would find a video or some useful piece of information, but then it would just end up being an argument about whether or not it was real. But they weren't really analyzing the image. They were just saying, I don't think this is real because I don't think, this could be true because of my beliefs, which wasn't what I was interested in. So I realized that by looking at the objects, the buildings, other kind of items in these images, you could actually compare that to satellite imagery of the location it's supposed to be in and then find a match, kind of like spot the difference and say that this must be the same location that's visible on satellite imagery because you can match up various things. So for example, one of the first ones I did was looking at a video filmed in Libya that was filmed next to a mosque with a dome and a minaret next to a major road in a town. And by looking at satellite imagery at that road, following it along, you can find the mosque, you can find the same dome and minaret, and you can look at the smaller and smaller details until you match the video to the image, the satellite imagery that you have perfectly. And this is what we call now geolocation. But at the time for me, we didn't even have a word for what that process was because it was so new. So through 2011, I spent my time kind of arguing on internet forums, and I started up a Twitter account so I could have kind of post threads about, what I was seeing. But I wanted a space where I could dive into things in more detail. So I started a blog called the Brown Moses blog, which was named after a Frank Zappa song I'd been listening to at that time. So it was quite random. I had no intention for this to be anything more than just a place to put my thoughts. It wasn't meant to be a big kind of media thing or anything like that. It was just my hobby. I was doing for fun. I started looking at videos coming from the conflict in Syria in 2012 when I just launched the blog, and I didn't speak any Arabic, so I couldn't really understand what people were saying, but I could see that they had all kinds of different weaponry. And at that point, it wasn't very clear what kind of weapons were being used, what weapons the Syrian opposition had. So I just took it upon myself to start learning how to identify these weapons. And that actually became increasingly crucial because first, there were allegations of weapons smuggling to opposition groups, but there were also allegations of chemical weapon attacks. So that year I spent in 2012 really learning that information, how to identify weapons, became really, really important in 2013. In 2013, at the start of the year, I had spent about a year identifying weapons from the conflict. And I'd started seeing new weapons appearing that I'd never seen before. So I started going through what was now a collection of about 450 YouTube channels used by various Syrian opposition groups. So these are armed group media centers that had kind of formed over the last couple of years of the conflict in Syria. You didn't have loads of people posting stuff on YouTube because in opposition areas, the internet was pretty much cut off many times. So they would have one or two central media centers for a town, or there would be an opposition arms group who had a satellite phone who could upload videos. So you can actually follow all of these videos coming from Syria on a daily basis. And I realized that these weapons were all linked to one country, the former Yugoslavia. And there had been rumors of weapons smuggling at the time, but no one had actual evidence of this. And I started to piece together all this information, and a journalist who'd been following my work for a while from the New York Times expressed interest in it. And that actually ended up as a front page story on the New York Times, my first really big story, because I'd actually found evidence, the first evidence of weapons smuggling to the Syrian opposition in the YouTube videos they themselves were posting on the internet. So when you have limited language skills like I did, and you're looking at content coming from places like Syria and Libya, there is still information you can get from these videos. So you can broadly see what the videos are about because they have titles and a description sometimes. Often they're shared online by people who are discussing the content of the videos, and you have things like Google Translate. So if stuff is written in Arabic, it's quite easy to then translate it. But then you can see you're rather than listening to what people are saying and thinking, oh, this is what's happening, you're actually looking what's happening in the video. What am I being shown here? So throughout 2013, I first then started encountering videos that showed cluster munitions, the first actual evidence of cluster munition use in the conflict in Syria, again, posted on social media, on YouTube channels by people on the ground documenting this stuff. And that work led me to contact with Human Rights Watch, who had been working on that issue a lot. And then